Hello. This story is about worms. The wonderful thing about worms. As I read it to you, I'd like to hear you all shout, "That's the wonderful thing about worms," when you see it on the page. Are you sitting comfortably? Then we will begin. Lots of people go, yakety poopety when they see a worm wriggling in the soil in their garden. But here are some interesting things about the earthworm, so that next time you see one you will say, "That's the wonderful thing about worms."
Yakety poot. Oh no. Yakety poopity.
Did you know that worms have an amazing ability to munch through all the dead leaves which fall from the trees, regurgitate them, and make them into organic compost which is 10 times more nutritious than normal soil? They wiggle and giggle their way through the soil, making it better for drainage, digging, and growing plants or vegetables. As well as dead leaves, worms enjoy eating potato peelings, apple cores, onion skins, banana peels, carrot toppings, grass cuttings. In fact, they love eating all the food which we throw away into the compost heap. That's the wonderful thing about worms. Apparently, worms can eat about 3 times their own weight, which is quite a lot of food. It is probably pretty similar to the amount of food we are all eating during lockdown.
Pardon you.
Scientists have done research to discover if worms fart, and the results say no. But can you imagine the smell if all the worms were farting at the same time? Because they are all eating 3 times as much food as their body weight. So it's a good thing they don't. That's the wonderful thing about worms. Worms can breathe air in and carbon dioxide out, just like us, but they don't have lungs. They can't breathe through their mouth, and they certainly can't breathe through their nose because they don't even have one. They breathe through their skin. That's the wonderful thing about worms. If a worm is chopped in half, a magical thing happens. The head is able to grow a new tail, but the tail end isn't able to grow a new head. What happens is this. The worm paramedics swoop in and carefully carry the damaged worm away on a stretcher to the worm hospital. Once at the worm hospital, they are bandaged, looked after and cared for until the tail end grows and they are fit and well enough to be back at work. That's the wonderful thing about worms. A marvellous biological fact about earthworms is that each worm has both male and female reproductive organs, so that any worm can have a baby. Which is really rather spectacular, don't you think? Worms have to be on their guard all the time, because quite a lot of other animals like to eat them, including snails, birds, rats, moles, foxes.
Psst! Quick, they're coming. Let's hide behind this tree.
Hens like worms too. They are actually rather clever because they then go on to lay eggs, which we like to eat. Fried with bacon, scrambled on toast, folded in half as an omelette, soft boiled with soldiers, mashed in sandwiches, but they can be a bit smelly. That's the wonderful thing about worms. Some people like to chase their friends with worms. Then there are others who are scared of worms. But actually, if you wanted to look as cool as a superhero, you could help those who were frightened of worms. That's the wonderful thing about worms. you ever wondered if worms poop? Well, yes they do. They poop all the huge amount of soil which passes through their bodies, making the incredibly nutritious soil. But do remember to wash your hands after you've handled one. That's the wonderful thing about worms. If you are out at night when it is dark, be very careful where you walk because you may notice some worms carrying their handy night torches. Don't be alarmed, as these ones are called night crawlers and they pop out for some exciting nighttime worm adventures. Some have asked if there will be worms in heaven. Well, the beginning of the Bible tells us that God made the animals and was pleased with all that he had created. Then, at the end of the Bible, it talks about how heaven will be like a beautiful garden, even more beautiful than we have ever seen. So, if God likes animals and gardens, there will probably be worms in heaven. Can you imagine living close to worms and not saying, "Ugh, yakety poopity," but instead we might say, "Good morning, worm, and how are you today?" Can you believe such a small, insignificant animal, which has been so intricately made, has such a great purpose upon the earth? Yes, that's the wonderful thing about worms. The end.
Aww.